I'm David Tao, and welcome to the Theories of Everything program. Viewers, this is another in our update series in which we review some of the major big picture programs that we've previously covered. Programs such as Are We Living in a Matrix? Now, this particular topic has been one of the most controversial but also one of the most exciting cutting-edge topics that we've attempted to cover in our series. Now, the reason for this is twofold. First of all, there have been and continue to be major developments in this area, basically relating to the understanding of information theory, and also in relation to understanding new forms of techniques for solving problems such as cellular automata. But again, we review this particular topic because it's current in the social sense. There is also the next sequel to The Matrix being played at the moment, Matrix Reloaded. And that in itself brings up some interesting issues. The issues are, first of all, that we are already looking at films which are themselves simulations of real life in a sense. Even if they are imaginary in many ways, they're still simulated processes that are being discovered on the screen. But we're actually making a simulation about a simulation. So that's sort of an additional step in this process. And that causes a lot of social discussion. People discuss living in a matrix. It becomes a common sort of paradigm in which everyone gets involved, and that's also a good thing. It's a good thing because it exercises the philosophical aspects. It pushes the philosophical boundaries of our discussions. So let's have a quick look at some of the elements in the Matrix Reloaded. There are three major ones. There's the matrix concept itself, which is very potent, which wasn't further developed in this particular sequel. It was primarily fleshed out in the initial Matrix. But it also the film focuses on the agents themselves, the bad guys, Mr. Smith and his clones. It also focuses somewhat on the machines that are controlling the Matrix, that have initiated it and control it. So let's have a look at those two elements first. We'll look at the possibility of sentient computer programs that manifest in the form of clones, if you like, and also the possibility that machines may have enough intelligence to run something like the Matrix. Well, first of all, if we look at the clone concept, already and currently there are programs that might be called agents. We've discussed them a number of times. They are empowered, if you like, to fulfill goals, but they're given quite a bit of freedom in the way that they solve those particular goals or problems or meet those goals. In other words, they're endowed with artificial intelligence. They're not normal step-by-step programs where every contingency is pre-calculated and programmed. They're a much broader class of programs, and they are capable of adapting and learning by experience as they go about their work. And some of their work is becoming extremely critical to humans. Critical mission software, if you like, or mission critical decisions are being made in areas such as air traffic control and weather forecasting. Now, both these areas are quite vital to humans and vital to their well-being, and they're being entrusted, if you like, to programs in the form of these intelligent agents, which are quite mobile, free in a sense to roam the internet, co-opt resources, and actually copy or clone other agents to assist them in that process. They're supposed to eventually return to their source of origin, to the particular website or wherever that they were originated in, and where they're supposed to be deleted. But of course, like space junk, it doesn't always happen like that. Some of these sentient agents, mobile agents, whatever they're called, do escape, if you like, and roam around the internet. There's just been a conference on developing higher levels of security to counteract this possibility. The possibility, in fact, of rogue software agents. rogue intelligent agents roaming around the internet, cyberspace, our space, which we'll increasingly live in as time goes by. So that's the first aspect of the film. In other words, the clones in the film are not so far removed from the clones that we're developing, the agents that we're developing currently. And they can be both bad and good. Bad if they intrude into areas that they're not supposed to intrude into, for example, into other applications. Let's come quickly then to the intelligent machines. That's been also a topic that we've covered broadly in previous programs. It's really based around what another form of artificial intelligence called evolutionary algorithms. These are programs that again form the basis, and also with agents as well, to learn by experience and perform improved strategies for achieving goals. And machines, or in the form of software if you like, have been developed quite recently to play drafts against humans. Now, drafts is perhaps not quite as complex a game as chess, where of course other machines have been developed to do that too, and they also learn by experience. But the draft playing machines were of particular interest because they were in the form of a number of, they incorporated a number of neural networks, which are another form of artificial intelligence similar to our brain, the way our brain cells work. And each of those were competing on an evolutionary basis with each other to come up with the best strategy to play drafts. They were given extremely rudimentary, basic rules where pieces can go to start with. But they had to develop from scratch the strategy that humans have also evolved. Control of the central area of the board, etc. The demands to reach the back and become a king and then get more mobility and so forth. They had to develop those strategies from scratch, and they did it very well over about a couple of hundred generations of strategy testing, competing, the neural networks competing with each other in a sense to come up with the right strategy. So once you have that capability, you can easily build it into robots and into machines, and you have machines that are quite capable in the long term of running scenarios such as in the Matrix Reloaded, running the Matrix itself, for example, or running a factory, or running any other process that humans might delegate to it. By the way, viewers, it's not hard to give those sentient programs human form either. We've seen, when we discussed this program previously, when we discussed the issues involved, we looked at the way that humans have been able, or scientists, computer scientists, have been able to simulate now a basis of a fractal basis, for example, a mathematical fractal basis to generate the images required. We've seen how that's quite feasible, so there's no problem going from intelligent software to either machine hardware in any form or agents, human-style agents, but agents that can transform and take any other shape in any other form. And of course, as time goes by, this ability, this capability to simulate any form very realistically will continue. Now, and this is all part of the simulation process, so let's return to the matrix concept itself and the feasibility of being able to simulate us, not just our outsides, not just our form, but our whole cognitive thinking, our brain space, our behaviour, our social attitudes, our emotions, etc. Now, in the previous program on this topic, we looked at various scenarios. We looked basically at a simplified probability calculation called the Drake equation that calculates the number of potential civilizations in the universe that might be capable of doing this form of advanced simulation. And that was obtained probabilistically by looking at the number of suns that are similar to our sun, 400 billion in our galaxy alone, 100 billion galaxies. A proportion of those suns might be similar to ours, mainstream type suns that evolve over a long period, giving us time to evolve on our planets. And the number of planets that might potentially form that might be conducive to life, rocky planets, the estimates are around 10 to the power 20 in the universe as a whole. And then the percentage of those that might have appropriate atmospheres, that might have water, that might have the right amount of gravity to hold that atmosphere in place, etc., the right amount of volcanic action to generate various other chemical compounds, carbon dioxide, etc., that might be extremely useful to life. And so combining all those elements, all those sort of probabilities together, the calculation was that there are probably several thousand civilizations in our galaxy alone that may have been around longer than us, and therefore developed their technology to a greater degree, and therefore be capable because of their mastery over energy and information technology. Advanced computer processing, for example, advanced internet processing, might well be capable of performing these the extraordinary feat of simulating us all. Viewers, remember, it doesn't require very much of a head start by any civilization for them to appear to be performing virtually magical feats. If they have a head start of even 100 years, 200 years, and certainly 500 years on us technologically, then there's no doubt, judging by our current performance, the last 100 years from horses to space stations, there's no doubt that their mastery over physical processes would be extremely advanced and quite capable of being able to simulate the sort of things that we're talking about, simulate life, simulate all the quarks and the atoms and the molecules and the cells and the behaviour that makes up life. There's been a number of calculations done by physicists on the straight physical level to work out the number of quantum states that would be needed to simulate a human being. I think I mentioned them once before. It's 10 to the power of 10 to that power of 45. So that's an enormous number of quantum states, but well within the capability, in fact, of a universal computing machine using unlimited information processing power as well as unlimited energy, tapping directly into the sun, for example, fusion energy from there. So it's it wouldn't be beyond these more advanced civilizations to do that. A total of all quantum states, all bits of information that would have to be simulated to reproduce a universe. So, and again, humans here are already doing it. If this sounds far-fetched, the game of Sims itself, the most popular game on the planet, involves hundreds and hundreds of thousands of individuals recreating a society of little characters that have relationships amongst themselves. They take each other out on dates, they buy clothes, they interior decorate, they shop at malls. There's literally thousands of authors and collaborators developing artifacts for this society. 20 million copies of this game have been sold, and it just goes on and on proliferating. And it actually copies, gradually over time, will copy every instance of our society, will replicate that in basic, simple form to start with, but gradually becoming more complex. So we're doing this already, and of course we're simulating complex physical processes on Earth to advance the state of our knowledge, advance the state of science, simulating the weather, simulating turbulence, simulating the evolution of galaxies, simulating stock market interactions, and so on and so on. Almost every more complex physical process is being simulated in a computer, where it becomes, of course, just bits of information. And this is where it becomes particularly fascinating, because we come back to this whole notion of what information is. In a previous program, again, we looked at this, the nature of information. We looked at the various tools that might be used, that are being used currently, and may increasingly be used to simulate any process. So viewers, what are these simulation tools? What are the tools that can be used to build simulations of us or the universe? Well, we've discussed them briefly previously. The major one, the one that has come into prominence over the last 10-20 years, is of course cellular automata. Cellular automata came into direct prominence in about the 1970s with the game of life developed by John Conway, and that consisted of a infinite grid, like a giant chessboard, on which patterns could play depending on the simple rules. The simple rules were a particular square would change its colour from black to white depending on the status of its neighbours. There could be up to 8 neighbours, 8 adjoining squares, and they, depending on their colour, if 3 of them were black, for example, the particular cell they're adjacent to might die, might change from black to white. That might change to life, it might bring it to life, or it might change to white from black, so it might stay the same. Very simple rules, depending on the neighbours, neighbouring cells, the state of those neighbouring cells. So it can be called a state machine. And over time, these patterns would just flow, and they would flow on a computer, of course. And sometimes the patterns would be simple and repetitive, and sometimes they'd go through simple cycles, but at other times they might die out, but at other times they'd develop into quite complex, fascinating shapes that would maintain those patterns for some time. Simulations of natural processes, patterns of seashells or particular coats of animals, or patterns of turbulence, whatever. Now this game of life started things buzzing amongst mathematicians and scientists, and we've recently had a look at Stephen Wolfram's book, A New Kind of Science, in which he extrapolates on this process and goes into it in great depth. He spent 10 years, in fact, looking at these concepts, developing these particular notions of a whole universe almost being generated, our universe being generated from a series of simple rules played out on a grid. He also experimented beyond just the 2-dimensional grid to 3-dimensional grids, 4-dimensional, multi-dimensional grids, to see if there are any major variations. It's impossible to replicate those patterns as they emerge. You can't backtrack. They're non-deterministic. You just can't take a few steps back and see what they look like. Then they change, evolve constantly over time, and the patterns cannot normally be predicted. So from this study, though, Wolfram determined that many of the, as Conway did earlier, but in a much simpler form, that from these sorts of patterns could be generated the underlying processes of life. And you could in fact model life or simulate life much more effectively using cellular automata than you could by the traditional tools of scientists, sets of differential equations, basically using calculus to model change. But traditional analytical calculus type tools are not good where you get sudden changes, where you get discontinuities, and they occur all the time in real life. So cellular automata are much better. Now, we discussed this, but what's new? Well, what's new is a more recent update to this by another physicist to this process of cellular automata modelling the universe type concept. This is something that is quite extraordinary, because what the physicist has said, what the Fredkin, his name is, D. Fredkin, he has suggested that what's space-time and the universe and everything, all matter, is not just possibly simulated using these sorts of simple rules to develop reality itself. Now, this is very similar to other physical theories that we've discussed, loop quantum gravity, for example, quite recently, which suggests that space-time evolves as a flow of information from the past to the future through a network whose nodes represent volumes and areas of space, etc., and whose connections represent the angular momentum of particles. Basically, both are suggesting that information is the bottom substrate of everything, of matter. In other words, we think of it in our world generally as matter being something that information as being some abstract concept that describes matter, that describes not only the physical attributes of matter, but describes anything that exists in our reality. In other words, that's why we developed computers, so that we could abstract information, store it, process it, etc., about real things, so-called real things. What physicists are doing currently, and philosophers and computer scientists, is to reverse that process. The whole concept is being turned on its head. In a nutshell, matter is seen as an emergent property of information, just like consciousness, or the mind, can be seen as an emergent property of the physical brain, but in reverse. In other words, Professor Friedkin has come up with a series of rules, patterned actually on a three-dimensional grid, but like a giant tapestry, with the cross threads representing the change in binary digits flowing again across the major time steps. In fact, he says that there is a clock at work. Basically, time is discrete, the process is discrete, and the tapestry weaves itself according to a number of micro steps over time. Now, what he's done is model the particles that are part of the standard model, the quarks and electrons, as swarms of bits flowing through this tapestry, the cells of which are, again, represent cellular automata state machine. He represents motion and momentum and energy by various operations. A swapping of cells, for example, represents from one colour from black to white represents an energy change, a change which represents an energy process. And so he's been able to model the building blocks, the forces and the matter building blocks of reality. And he says, though, and again a lot of physicists are disputing this, but some are beginning to see it his way, that this is the real reality, this is the underlying reality, the matter reality, all those forces, all the building blocks of matter that have become standard and in the literature are in fact manifested from the basic information building blocks from this tapestry, from this loom of life. So there's a massive debate going on. Philosophers are also split as to the real nature of reality, if you like. And this is going to run and run for some time, for a long time, in fact. But there's some very strong evidence to suggest that Ed Fredkin's model, which is not a model but a real reality, is possibly going to win out, because it's getting support from the other major physical theories such as string theories and, as I mentioned, loop quantum gravity. So we're coming, viewers. This is the real crux of this whole thing. If this is the real reality, if the universe is one vast cellular automata run by, if you like, a clock in discrete steps of time, run as a binary process from simple rules, from very elementary rules indeed, producing all the stuff that we see around us, does this mean that there's no need to simulate a universe? It's already, if you like, a simulation of our perception of our universe, of our life. So viewers, what does this really mean? If Professor Fredkin's model is correct, in other words, if his view of reality is the ultimate reality, and all the rest is built layered on top of it, the stuff that we thought was the real reality that could then be simulated with something like cellular automata to appear to be real, it means that we have to readjust our thinking entirely. Because if a civilization, a more advanced civilization, is replicating us and our universe, they are representing what basically already is a grid structure, a grid simulation, a very simple structure based on very simple rules. In other words, they're not doing quite what we thought they would be doing by representing matter and forces as information. They're replicating or copying or cloning an information universe. Incidentally, viewers, we're not just talking about this universe in terms of technologically advanced civilizations, we're talking about a multiverse. The latest theories of space, time, suggest that we're not living in a closed universe at all, we're living in an open universe that is going to expand forever and ever. And according to the latest measurements of quantum fluctuations by the MAP satellite, for example, this is well and truly gospel. And basically it says that because we're living in this, we're not living in a closed universe, it means that the universe goes on ad infinitum, and we live in a multiverse of containing an infinite number of universes. What it boils down to is that we have either Professor Fredkin has stumbled on the fact that we live in a simulated universe because he's discovered this giant chessboard model which appears to fit reality and to have everything generated from it, or it always did exist in that form, that is the real form, and simulating it is a lot easier than we originally thought, than anyone originally thought. But no doubt this simulation in either way has gone on and will continue to go on because there are an infinite number of universes and an infinite number of simulators, of which we are beginning to be one ourselves because we're developing all these games, the Sims, holograms, etc. We're developing our own simulations, which in 500 years will be at a very advanced state indeed, and we'll probably start developing our own micro-universes. So there it is, viewers. It's an interesting time that we live in because we can start to conceptualise these things, and the Matrix Reloaded is a small prototype of what we can not expect in terms of bad versus good, evil versus good, but basically what we can expect in terms of a continuing debate about the nature of a simulated universe and worlds such as the Matrix. I'm David Tao, and you've been watching the Theories of Everything program. I'll look forward to seeing you again next week. About the nature of a simulated universe and worlds such as the Matrix. I'm David Tao.